Have you ever wondered what really happens after a long marriage ends? Not the stories people share at brunches, not the social media posts, not the carefully crafted versions of freedom and new beginnings. I'm talking about the side no one discusses, the quiet, unsettling reality that unfolds when a relationship dissolves. Divorce isn't just a legal process or a social milestone. It's a seismic shift in the mind, in habits, in the way someone perceives the world around them. And here's the part almost nobody warns you about. It's not about who was right or wrong, and it's certainly not about winning or losing. It's about the psychological consequences that sneak in silently, reshaping lives in ways people rarely anticipate. Tonight I'm going to take you behind the curtain. We're going to explore the hidden patterns, the emotional undercurrents, the subtle transformations that take place when someone steps out of a long-term marriage. This isn't gossip. This isn't judgment. This is a look at what happens when the life you thought you knew suddenly disappears, and the truth is far more complicated than anyone admits. You sit alone in your apartment, the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional car passing outside, the only sounds breaking the silence. Your phone lights up, notifications from work, messages from friends, but none of them fill the quiet that seems to stretch longer each evening. The living room once shared now feels larger, emptier, like it's echoing with the memories you can't shake. You scroll through social media, almost absent-mindedly, and there she is, smiling, radiant, seemingly thriving. Every post, every photo, every caption about new beginnings makes it feel like she's living a life completely untouched by the separation. And yet, you know better. You know that behind those filtered moments there's a world of uncertainty, doubt, and nights just as long as yours. Your routines have shifted. The mornings feel off balance, the coffee tastes different, the familiar rhythm of daily life is suddenly disrupted. Even the small things, a favourite mug, the side of the bed she used to occupy, the simple sound of a laugh in the hall, remind you that the world you knew is gone. And in that quiet, almost unbearable stillness, you realise something important. Your life hasn't ended. You're still here, still moving forward, still processing. But for now, all that matters is that someone finally understands the tension, the weight, the invisible struggle of being the one left behind. Because while the world sees her happiness, you live the truth, the slow, patient, often lonely reconstruction of your own life, day by day. It's easy to look at her life now and assume she's thriving. Photos of laughter, new friends, vacations she never took before. It all paints a picture of effortless happiness. But appearances are rarely the full story. External joy does not always reflect internal stability, and what the world sees is often a carefully managed version of reality. When someone leaves a long-term marriage, they aren't just stepping away from a person, they're stepping away from an entire framework that shaped their life. Every habit, every routine, every little decision was anchored around that shared structure. Wake-up times, weekend plans, even the way she thought about herself. All of it was intertwined with the life she left behind. At first, freedom feels exhilarating. The sudden ability to make every choice, to rearrange life on her terms, is intoxicating. It feels like empowerment. But freedom without structure is also disorienting. The routines that once offered stability are gone. The implicit guideposts that gave meaning to days and decisions vanish almost overnight. This isn't weakness, it's human nature. We all build identity around what we know, around patterns that shape how we move through the world. When those patterns are removed, the mind experiences a kind of drift. Emotional dependency on routine and structure isn't a flaw, it's a built-in mechanism to navigate complexity. And suddenly, what seemed like liberation begins to feel unfamiliar, even unsettling. So while she may look unshakable on the surface, the truth is more nuanced. Her outward confidence masks the quiet recalibration happening beneath. And for you, watching from the sidelines, this is a critical revelation. Her happiness may not be what it appears to be. Because sometimes what looks like freedom is just the mind learning to float without a net. And the fall is slower, quieter, and far more disorienting than anyone could imagine. Phase 1 begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, yet it's the stage where everything feels possible. She wakes up each morning with a sense of purpose she hasn't felt in years, as if the act of leaving has unlocked a version of herself she thought had been buried. The days are filled with new routines: yoga classes in the morning, brunches with friends she barely knew before, spontaneous errands that feel like adventures. Even small changes like rearranging the furniture or redecorating a room carry the thrill of novelty. Social validation floods in, amplifying the effect. Friends, family, and even acquaintances praise her choices. "You've never looked better," they say. "You deserve this." Compliments, encouragement, and attention become daily rituals, creating an invisible high that makes her feel unstoppable. In this environment, it's easy to believe she has discovered the truest version of herself. Every new experience reinforces the narrative. She is independent, confident, and undeniably right in her decision. But beneath the excitement, a subtle confusion begins to form. Attention is not the same as value, yet it can feel indistinguishable. The novelty of every compliment, every new person, every spontaneous moment is thrilling, but it's temporary. She mistakes this surge of attention and change for personal growth, equating excitement with actual transformation. The human mind is wired to seek affirmation, and right now, it's finding it in all the wrong places. In daily life, this phase is marked by bursts of overconfidence. She tries new hobbies, updates her wardrobe, tests boundaries she never dared before. Even her social circle acts as reinforcement, echoing the belief that she has truly escaped and reinvented herself. She is living in a story she's authoring, and at first it feels flawless. For the observer, it's important to recognize that this stage, while intoxicating, is never permanent. What seems like absolute empowerment is built on novelty and external validation. The high, the excitement, the relentless energy, they're all temporary structures, and eventually the foundations begin to shift. Phase 1 is mesmerizing, but it's only the opening act. The cracks are already forming, quietly beneath the surface, waiting to guide her into the next stage. Phase 2 is subtle, almost invisible at first, but it's where the honeymoon with her newfound freedom begins to fade. The excitement that once felt limitless now meets the constraints of reality. Dates that seemed thrilling in theory start to feel predictable. Conversations loop, compliments feel rehearsed, and the energy she once radiated begins to diminish under the weight of repetition. She begins to notice patterns she hadn't seen before. The new people she meets carry similar flaws, display the same shallow interest, or repeat the same hollow lines. What initially felt like variety now feels like monotony. Modern dating, with its endless options and curated interactions, has a strange way of fostering emotional detachment. Attention comes quickly, but also fades just as fast, leaving her searching for the next fix of validation. At the same time, comparisons creep in, almost imperceptibly. She may not consciously think of him, but the mind has a way of measuring the familiar against the unknown. Memories of a partner who was consistent, predictable, or simply known start to rise. Emotional familiarity begins to feel like safety, and novelty, no matter how exciting, can't replicate the subtle assurance of years spent in understanding. Every misstep, every shallow conversation, every fleeting disappointment becomes a reminder that excitement alone cannot substitute for connection. Her confidence remains outwardly intact, but internally, she starts to question the choices she made. Moments of doubt appear in brief flashes, when a date ends poorly, when a text goes unanswered, when the thrill of attention dies as quickly as it arrived. This stage is less dramatic than the first, but far more significant. It's where the narrative she built for herself starts to face tension with reality. Emotional friction begins to form quietly in the gaps between expectation and experience. The realization is gentle but persistent. What felt like liberation now carries an undercurrent of disillusionment. For the viewer, this is the turning point to recognize. The early thrill is fading, and the illusion of freedom is starting to collide with the practical emotional realities of life after divorce. This is where doubt quietly begins, and the mind starts to seek the stability it once had. Phase 3 is where the quiet begins to feel heavy. The initial thrill of freedom has faded, and in its place comes a subtle, almost unnoticeable panic. Loneliness is no longer a background hum. It's real, pressing, and unavoidable. Nights stretch longer than they used to. and the silence that once felt peaceful now carries the weight of absence. She finds herself exhausted from maintaining the image of confidence. Every smile, every social interaction, every post or message feels like a performance she can no longer sustain effortlessly. The mask she wore to convince herself and others that she's thriving starts to slip. Emotional fatigue sets in, and with it comes confusion. She wants independence, but she misses stability. She craves attention, yet attention feels empty. During this phase, two reactions often appear. Some throw themselves into constant activity, dates, outings, social media, even work, anything to distract from the void inside. The world moves fast around them, but the calm in her mind remains restless. Others retreat, withdrawing from interaction, scrolling through old photos, replaying memories, and sitting in silence as if hoping time alone can provide the clarity and comfort that no external validation can. Nighttime thoughts become relentless. Every small memory, every unspoken conversation, every moment of connection that once felt safe resurfaces. She wonders if the choices she made were truly hers, or if they were fueled by a fleeting desire for change. Sleep comes in fragments, and even in moments of rest, her mind wanders to questions she cannot answer. For the viewer, it becomes clear this is not a phase of empowerment. She is not unstoppable. She is not thriving. She is coping. Her confidence, once visible and radiant, has become a fragile veneer masking the emotional storm beneath. The novelty has worn off, distractions lose their shine, and reality is slowly pressing in from every direction. This stage is critical to understand because it sets the tone for what comes next. The mind, pushed past excitement and novelty, begins a process of recalibration. Emotional patterns are tested, vulnerabilities surface, and the first true cracks in the illusion of independence become undeniable. She is learning, slowly and painfully, that freedom is not always as effortless as it seemed. By the time phase 3 sets in, the mind has already started protecting itself. Humans are wired to preserve their sense of self, and when confronted with choices that carry regret, the brain engages in subtle but powerful defense mechanisms. One of the most common is ego protection, a way to shield oneself from the emotional pain of acknowledging mistakes. Memory rewriting begins almost automatically. Moments from the past are reshaped, selective details are emphasized or minimized, and the story she tells herself starts to drift from reality. The marriage she left may suddenly appear less flawed in retrospect. The partner she once criticized now seems more reliable, more patient, or more understanding than she remembered. It's not manipulation, it's emotional rationalization at work. Admitting regret feels impossible. The identity she built post-divorce depends on her being convinced she made the right choice. To openly acknowledge doubt or disappointment would shatter that carefully constructed narrative. Instead, the mind finds ways to redirect blame onto the world, on circumstances, on the people around her, anything to avoid the unbearable confrontation with her own decisions. Psychologists call this process cognitive dissonance, the tension that arises when reality collides with belief. The mind resolves it by adjusting the story, not the facts. She convinces herself that she is still in control, still thriving, while underneath, she is slowly reconciling with uncomfortable truths. For the viewer, this stage is crucial to understand. None of this is cruelty, malice, or vindictiveness. It's a natural, human response to an emotional challenge that feels larger than life. It is, at its core, self-preservation. Recognizing this allows perspective. What may look like denial or stubbornness is actually the mind's way of surviving a shift it wasn't fully prepared to handle. And in understanding that, you can see the unfolding story with clarity, without judgment, and with the calm awareness of human psychology at work. Phase 4 is where reality finally settles in, and the illusions she built begin to crumble. Loneliness is no longer subtle. It presses in from every direction. Nights stretch long and silent, and the distractions that once masked the emptiness no longer suffice. What felt like freedom is starting to feel like isolation. Social support begins to fade. Friends who once cheered her on are quietly stepping back, either busy with their own lives or uncomfortable with her ongoing struggle. The circles that amplified her independence now grow quieter. Even well-meaning family members are unable to fill the gaps left by the absence of the life she walked away from. The cheer of novelty and attention diminishes, leaving her with the stark reality of solitude. Financial and emotional pressures also rise. The dual income security, shared expenses, and small comforts she once took for granted are now hers to manage alone. Every bill, every unexpected cost, every mundane responsibility feels magnified. Independence without resources is survival disguised as freedom, and it comes with a heavy, persistent weight. Daily life becomes a landscape of small but relentless challenges. Simple routines, deciding which side of the bed to sleep on, what to eat, who to call for support, turn into constant reminders of what she lost. Human touch, the casual comfort of a hand on the shoulder or a hug when upset, becomes a rare commodity. Emotional hunger sets in quietly, gnawing at the edges of her confidence and resolve. This is the stage where the mind can no longer ignore the consequences of earlier choices. The excitement, novelty, and validation that once felt sustaining are gone. The illusion has worn away, leaving her with a clear, unavoidable truth. The life she imagined after leaving is not the life she is living. For the viewer, the lesson is stark and grounding. This isn't punishment. This isn't dramatized failure. It is simply the outcome of decisions and actions laid bare. Understanding this phase allows perspective. What she is experiencing is the natural consequence of stepping away from stability, and the gravity of that reality cannot be ignored. While she navigates the quiet storm of Phase 4, he is quietly rebuilding. The transformation isn't loud and it doesn't seek attention. It's not about posting accomplishments or proving a point. It's about structure, discipline, and reclaiming control over the parts of life that matter most. He wakes up with routines that serve him, not to impress anyone but to restore balance. Exercise, work, hobbies, even small rituals. These are steps in creating stability and consistency. Each action is deliberate, not performed for validation. He isn't chasing attention or trying to prove worth. He's simply living in alignment with his own priorities. Internal growth becomes the foundation. Emotional intelligence, patience, and self-reflection replace frustration and confusion. He learns to measure progress quietly, in personal milestones rather than external recognition. The confidence he builds is steady, grounded, and real, because it comes from self-discipline, not comparison. Contrast is subtle, but undeniable. Where she's coping, he's growing. It's where novelty fades for her, purpose strengthens for him. This transformation is silent, but it carries weight. It is the kind of progress that does not need to be announced. It shows in his calm demeanour, in his focus, and in the clarity with which he approaches life. For the viewer, the message is empowering. You didn't fall behind, you didn't lose momentum. While others may have been swept up in the highs and lows of emotional turbulence, you have quietly rebuilt. This is not about victory over anyone else. It is about reclaiming your life, your stability, and your sense of self. And that quiet, steady growth will always speak louder than any fleeting drama ever could. By this stage, the true weight of her choices begins to surface. The life she imagined after leaving is not the one she's living, and the illusions that once protected her are fading. The first and deepest loss is the collapse of shared identity. Years spent intertwined with someone else, routines, plans, dreams, even small habits, cannot be rebuilt overnight. The version of herself that existed within that partnership no longer has a place. Alongside this comes the loss of emotional safety. The stability, consistency, and understanding that were once taken for granted are gone. Nights that were once comforting now feel hollow. Decisions that once felt simple now carry a quiet tension. The reassurance that came from a familiar presence is replaced with uncertainty, and every small choice carries more weight than it did before. Regret at this stage is not dramatic or explosive. It's a quiet, persistent awareness. She realizes that some things cannot be undone, no matter how much she wishes otherwise. The awareness comes too late to change the past. The understanding of what she gave up, sometimes for a fleeting thrill, sometimes for a belief in an idealized better life, lands with a heavy, inescapable finality. Daily life becomes a constant reminder of what was lost. Shared experiences, inside jokes, the comfort of mutual understanding, they cannot be recreated, only remembered. Each moment, no matter how ordinary, carries echoes of the life that could have been, and the emotional toll accumulates quietly but relentlessly. For the viewer, the takeaway is clear. Some choices carry consequences that cannot be reversed. This stage is not about punishment, blame, or malice. It's about the reality of actions and the lives they shape. Understanding this helps frame the story not as a cautionary tale about her alone, but as a sober reflection on the irreversible impact of decisions made in the search for freedom or fulfillment. At the end of this journey, it's important to pause and reflect. There is no villain, no dramatic confrontation, and no fantasy ending where someone wins or loses. What unfolds after a divorce is not about punishment or revenge, it's about consequences, quietly and inevitably taking shape. Choices create outcomes, every decision carries weight, and the lives we build are a reflection of those choices. Freedom without preparation can feel exhilarating at first, but reality eventually asserts itself. Stability lost cannot always be regained, and the illusions we construct cannot replace what was once real. Reality itself is neutral. It doesn't reward or punish based on desire or expectation. It simply reflects the world as it is. And sometimes that reflection is harsh. Sometimes it quietly teaches lessons through the natural unfolding of events, leaving only understanding in its wake. For the viewer, the takeaway is simple yet profound. This wasn't about her losing. It wasn't about him winning. It was about life correcting an illusion. The slow, steady process of consequence does not discriminate, and it leaves behind clarity that cannot be ignored. In the end, what remains is reflection, acceptance, and the sober knowledge that reality moves forward. Whether we are ready or not,